Well, I have to be honest. I really do love Bolsonaro. I think he's great. Like
I can see why.
everything about Bolsonaro's approach to the world is something that I think we need more of. We need more Bolsonaros everywhere, every country. In fact, Meloni in Italy is a good sort of proxy. Just the unrepentant. I don't care what you think because you're evil, and therefore. And that's the position that he begins with and carries on from. And so naturally, the left are just like, oh my God, he's a fascist. But as we're going to see, no, he's actually the opposite of a fascist. He's turning Brazil...
He's a threat.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that he's a fascist. He's actually some sort of insane libertarian, right? He's a kind of Hoppian libertarian, actually. But that's the point. He's not a fascist. He's a threat, right? And I know that he's not a fascist because, of course, we know all about fascism because we've had to read it. Because all the left do is go, oh, that's fascist, that's fascist, that's fascist. So I was like, right, okay, I actually need to figure out what fascism is. So I went and read Giovanni Gentili, the philosopher of fascisms, the origins and doctrine of fascism. And it turns out that virtually no one is a fascist because fascists are insane. And their commitments, the metaphysical commitments they make are pure Rousseau taken to the nth degree, like literal madness. So virtually no one is actually a fascist, and those people who are fascists have a kind of commitment in the same way socialists do. It's just socialists are slightly less crazy than fascists are.
But the amount of commitments you have to make to be one is so insane that I'm not sure there are many more than 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a totally dead doctrine. And good. But anyway, so let's move on to the problems with Brazil, because Brazil has lots and lots of problems. I mean, the first one, of course, is the drug barons. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this, but I mean, you can find like just articles like this from the New York Times where the neighboring countries are like, oh my God, you know, Brazil's drug lords are coming here and ruining everything here, and we've got a weak state, we've got a weak army.
They're bringing crime, drugs. Some, I assume, are good people.
No, 0 are good people. They are 0 of these, and they are horrifically brutal. Like, they make the Assyrians look like they're amateurs, honestly. Just so many examples, just in this article, of just terrible, terrible things, right? And, of course, the New York Times has to... I mean, just look at this, just murders just going on. It's just insane. Insane. They put 187 pounds of explosives on a car to free a drug lord who's in jail. It's just like... I mean, these people are very, very serious people, right?
Hey, business is business.
Yeah. And apparently a lot of American weapons are being smuggled over there. And these drug gangs have tens of thousands of foot soldiers. So this is a real problem that we do not have over here. Corruption is, of course, another major problem in Brazil. Really big problem. I mean, the last 3 presidents of Brazil have basically been brought down by corruption scandals. The former president, Lula da Silva, he's the main guy that we'll be talking about. Well, he spent like 3 years in jail because of corruption charges. And he was campaigning from jail for this campaign, incidentally. He apparently received over $1 million in kickbacks, which he put towards renovating his beachfront apartment. He's basically the Brazilian version of Bernie Sanders. Not even joking. And there were additional charges of money laundering. His successor, Dilma Rousseff, was impeached for mismanaging the federal budget. And successor, Michael Temer, was arrested on charges of funneling an estimated $470 million into a criminal organization he spearheaded. So, major problems with corruption, major problems with drugs.
And these aren't just non-aligned random politician types.
No,
these are all from the Workers' Party.
Yes, they are. Yes, it's corrupt socialists. And so they have a political adage in Brazil. They steal, but they get things done. Which is one way of looking at it.
Vote for me.
Yeah. But this is a great article, and this explains a lot of the problems that Brazil has from a political perspective, right? They say, as in much of Latin America, parties in Brazil are often more mere vehicles for patronage. They are a device for facilitating negotiations between regional and economic interests and the government, all in the guise of democracy. And so that's what Lula and his fellow leftists are essentially playing into. And that's why they're taking all the money. And of course, Lula was let out of jail, not because he wasn't taking money, but because the courts that sentenced him lacked jurisdiction. It's not you didn't do it. It's, well, they don't have the authority to lock you up for what you apparently did.
So run along now.
That's exactly what happened, yeah.
Okay.
There's still a legal battle going on, but to be fair, it's probably not going to go anywhere. Now, Lula wasn't actually terrible, and I think it's important to point that out. On balance, his policies were actually not atrocious, right? Because he had the good fortune of presiding over Brazil during a period of general economic growth until 2011. So from 2004 until 2011, he had quite a good run. As they say here, growth generated good jobs, unemployment fell to historically low levels, millions of workers moved into the formal sector with higher wages and full benefits. The expanding economy also meant credit for low-income consumers. The administration took additional steps to ensure poor Brazilians were fully incorporated into the growing economy. It strengthened the national minimum wage and social security and unemployment insurance programs. These changes protected the living standards of nearly 50 million low-income Brazilians. So one of the ways that a lot of Brazilians see this, apparently, is that essentially he redistributed wealth to poor people. But there are a lot of poor people in Brazil, and probably quite a few very corrupt and very rich people, so it doesn't seem entirely unjustified. He also used this economic boom to fund his signature social program, the Bolsa Familia. Now, this is actually quite a good idea, and actually, I can see why he'd do such a thing. So, the conditional cash transfer program gave a monthly stipend to poor mothers who keep their children in school.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a terrible idea.
I don't think you'd have to pay people usually to send their kids to school.
No, but you do. But anyway, after Lula was removed for office for corruption, the Brazilian economy started going down. I mean, the Brazilian economy was not good at all back in 2017, when it was basically moving into a recession. The growth was 0.1%, and that seems optimistic, frankly. But it was not going very well at all. And, of course, these are the problems that Bolsonaro came into office with. And, of course, you have another problem, which is Brazil is a very left-wing country. I mean, they have order and progress on their flag. So progressive politics is quite powerful in Brazil. Bolsonaro representing the order side of the equation, and Lula representing the progress side of the equation. So, I mean, this is from the Federalist, which I take as a reliable source on this, and they point out that, look, there's extreme leftism in Brazil, and of course the fake news that comes with it, right? They've got an interesting tale here. An interesting episode was when Bolsonaro was interviewed at a conference which was directed to more than 2,000 financial market executives on February the 6th. 5 days later, on February the 11th, one of the main newspapers in Brazil reported that Bolsonaro said in the conference that he would impose a curfew in favela and kill anyone who didn't obey it. Now, I mean, that does sound like something he would say, but it was entirely made up, right? So, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm not voting for you anymore.
the general disappointment of Bolsonaro supporters. And therefore, Bolsonaro, of course, ran as the candidate of law and order against corruption and leftism. And you get like amazing compilations like this, which we won't play because it's got copyright music on it. But it just you can see from the subtitles that, and I mean, Bolsonaro is a captain in the army.
Should we read some for the audio? Which is just
feel free.
If a criminal gets killed shooting a police officer who gives an F, as long as you don't rape, don't kidnap, and don't commit to armed robbery, you won't go to jail. That's all. Damn it. Yeah.
Did the police kill 60,000 crooks? I wish they killed 200,000. As you can see, you don't care at all about public safety, acting like little girls like sissies. Like, I love this guy so much.
I don't know why you would disagree with any of this, frankly.
As you can see, order and progress, well, he's very much on the order side of things.
This looks like progress to me.
Well, I mean, there's an argument to be made. But he's just the most outspoken against, like, the sort of leftist softness on criminality. Because this has been a major problem with Brazilian politics. Like, some say killers need more culture. What they really need is a beating and harsh punishment. Just like, yeah.
Sorry,
he's right. He's totally right.
You're going to talk to Norway, but what if we show the Somalis Swedish art culture? So, yeah, no, they're still going to do what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly... And he's, of course, going after leftists, trying to indoctrinate children into LGBTQ.
I mean, he literally says there, go and take it up the ass whether you wish, damn it.
Yeah.
Like, just don't do it in front of children.
And he's literally, I'm going to be colorblind as president, because he's like an arch libertarian here, right? He's not like a racial person.
No, like if you're gay, do what you want.
Yeah.
If you're into race mixing, do what you want. I guess.
Just not for children.
It's just like don't indoctrinate kids. Which libertarians.
And you can see just the general attitude. I love this. I don't care about votes. A politician who cares just about getting votes is scum like any other. That's a great thing to tell a massive crowd, I think. That was a brilliant statement. They accuse me of everything except corruption. Another great line.
What they accuse you of is rather funny, though. It's like,
Yeah.
human rights, my ass.
This is definitely one of my favorite clip compilations. Because, I mean, like, I love the confrontational man. He's just like, no, you're evil and wrong and screw you, right? Again, ex-army captain, you gotta love it. And so it's for this confrontational attitude that I think he got stabbed by a communist on the election trail in 2018. But the communist was, okay, folks, don't worry. He was not convicted. He was acquitted because he was ruled to be mentally ill. That means communist. So
I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest.
On one hand, it's definitely true. On the other hand, they probably should.
It's a weird get-out clause.
Yeah, they probably should be punished, even though they're communists.
Yeah.
And mentally ill.
Though I would force them to say in the court, "I am indeed a communist and therefore mentally ill."
That
Like that's how you plead that you're mentally ill.
Communist, legally confirmed mentally ill in Brazil. I mean, but if we're going by precedent, how is that not precedent? Communists stabbed Bolsonaro. It's obviously a political attack. Well, what happened? Well, he's mentally ill. There we go.
Yeah, we have the same thing with Islamists here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do, actually. Anyway, so Bolsonaro finds a lot of support among footballers, weirdly, and has done in this election cycle as well, which I just think is a very interesting turn, right? It's like massive names in the football world who are just like, yeah, he's my guy. Anyway, so come to like the first year of Bolsonaro's presidency, because he's been president for 3 years now, 4 years. So he was exactly what they expected him to be, so... no hiding anything there. Bolsonaro, I'm going to ruin everyone's day. It's like, yeah, you ruined our day.
Oh, ruin the leftist day.
Well, yeah, exactly. Bolsonaro was in most ways what we expected him to be. Weirdly, that wasn't a big act. That wasn't a mask.
Everyone always acts so shocked.
Yeah, I know. Like, who could have imagined? Like when he's in these, like arguing with the leftists and stuff like this, it's like, yeah, it wasn't an act. Of course, it wasn't a bloody act. He's had a reasonably good year in terms of progress, and he held on to a strong nationalist base of support. Another sign the economy might be turning a corner is because it's been slightly up after 6 straight years of negative or stagnant growth, and he got Congress to approve a landmark decision to overhaul the country's pension system, which was a major victory for him. Also, one thing that he had pledged to do was reduce homicides, which we'll get into in a minute, actually, because I've got a graph that it shows you it much better. But they say, Bolsonaro, who pledged to defend police officers and said those who shoot criminals would be given medals rather than face legal punishment. What a Chad. I love this attitude. So anyway, say goodbye to your environmental budget, leftists, because that's gone. He literally goes to an environmentalist conference and they're like, yeah, so you're going to increase funding? He's like, yeah, and then next day cuts it by a quarter. So anyway, going to the economic growth of Brazil, if you can scroll down to the graph, it's these the bottom one here that we want to look at, really. So you can see the net. You can see before the 2 red ones at the end there, that's 2016, 2017. And of course, I think we can let him off for the COVID thing, because I don't really think that the COVID...
Yeah. Well, the entire West decided to turn off their economy, so
yeah,
everyone
exactly.
got screwed.
I don't think that's entirely his fault. So mild growth, so, he'd done more good than harm there. And of course, he moved to loosen gun laws.
They're doing a lot more good than harm.
A lot more good, yes. Because, of course, Brazil has a crime problem. It has the most homicides in the world. So there are 200 million people in Brazil, and lots of psychopaths who have got lots of guns. And so...
I mean, I don't even think it's close. Like, I don't know if you've got the Wikipedia list of just homicide per 100,000. Yeah. It's like everything gets a bit bad, and it just jumps to Brazil.
Brazil's like 30 or something. It's a ridiculously high number. Mm. It's like 64,000 people were killed by murder in Brazil. So
we have one there. You just see it's Brazil in the middle there. It's actually looking better than I remember it being.
Well,
I remember it being much worse.
Well, that's because...
a reason for that?
Yeah, exactly. That's because Bolsonaro was like, hey, do you need some guns? Because, the typical fascist arming the population, that's actually what a libertarian does. And so if you go to the next one, in fact, sorry, the previous one, there should be a graph on here. on this one. Where you can see the peak there. Yeah, there we go. 2019.
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, you can see.
So that's why it looks much better.
Yeah, and you go to like 2017, John. Whereas, yeah, so it's not that it wasn't the worst in the world. It's that Bolsonaro has resolved it being the worst in the world. I mean, it's still terrible, but that's a hell of a lot better than it was. There is
cut.
There is a downside to this though, which is when you have the sort of libertarian Ancapistan, and let's be fair, a lot of Brazil is remote, right? Should we say? You get militias taking over, as everyone who's ever debated with a libertarian will point out. You get militias in Ancapistan. It's just the way things work, and so they're like, no, it's not a dictatorship. It's worse, right? Imagine a society where state services have been reduced to the bare minimum, or have even stopped to exist. Yeah, just imagine. Just imagine
all the people.
Citizens and small commerce pay directly to armed groups, militias, to take care of families or their business' safety. The same mafia-style armed groups organise essential goods such as cooking gas and internet services, trafficking drugs inside communities and schools, and so on. So, like miniature states.
Yeah.
Again, libertarian paradise, opposite of fascism.
Yeah. Minimal taxes because of that as well.
On the weekends, citizens go to the local Pentecostal church where ministers, after delivering a conservative moral speech, circulate their electronic payment machines to collect the tithe. Health services are privatised and families are allowed to carry guns to protect themselves. This is the type of dystopic society that Jair Bolsonaro has in mind.
This sounds amazing. I want to visit. That's freaking hilarious.
People are allowed to carry guns to protect themselves. This is a dystopia, says the leftist. Bolsonaro is on a mission to destroy everything that he believes was built by the left.
Good. Salutes in the chat.
Yeah.
One now.
what am I supposed to say to that? That's why he aims to abolish every single Republican institution in the country. He undermines, defunds, or simply closes down any public agency that has been constituted to control the civic life and norms that rule social life. I wish the Conservatives would be taking some cues from this. Defund the Home Office, defund the Immigration Department, defund social services, and let's now talk about the NHS. No. Libertarian paradise is what he's creating, right?
Literally just secure the country with the army.
Yeah. Bolsonaro delivers weekly press conferences in which he targets minorities such as gays, indigenous people, and women. Women are a minority now, are they? He uses these encounters in his social media to provoke the left, and so far the centre-left or left political parties, social movements, and even mainstream media have been falling into the president's daily trolling. Genius.
I don't know what they whine about this. You remember when Trump was campaigning, he did something similar? Where he'd tell jokes, and they were like, oh my god, he's targeting people. It's like, jokes, man.
Bolsonaro clearly has a sense of humour as well.
Yeah. It's just whenever the right has anything to say that's comedic, it's some kind of call to death.
Yeah.
Whereas when the left tells a joke, even if it's about killing all white people, and they're unironic in it, then it's still a joke, bro.
I don't think the left does tell jokes. Anyway, the point is an armed society is a polite society, right? And as Bolsonaro is like, hey, you guys could get armed. They're like, yeah, we will. Actually, they give the example of Wagner Canario here, who's a former Brazilian army sergeant who had a gun pointed to his head when he was in the car with his family, and he wants a gun for himself to defend himself from these kind of robbers and muggers. Since 2018, the number of guns in private hands has doubled to nearly 2 million, which isn't actually that many.
It's a good start, though.
We've got about 2 million guns privately owned in Britain. So it's actually not very many.
Yeah, Brazil's population is way bigger.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. So that's actually a small population. But the thing is, their gun laws are very restrictive, apparently. And weirdly, the cartels weren't following them at all. So, when the American Republicans are like, oh, yes, the criminals won't get guns illegally. Well, Brazil's a great case study, and yes, they will, actually, and they don't care. So anyway, how did he do in his first year? Here's another article of people saying, well, gotta be honest, he actually did all right. It's hard to argue, apparently. He introduced loads of complex reforms, such as tax and labour policies, reduced government spending, increased trade openings, and infrastructure investment. So good, basically. While business leaders and foreign investors appear increasingly confident that economic revival is in sight, many prominent analysts paint a darker picture. These are going to be left-wing analysts. Homicides and other violent crimes, according to criminal statistics, have fallen dramatically this year, but there is also a steep rise in murders by the police. You have criminals.
It's not a murder.
Yeah,
I was shot, so I killed him. You murderer.
Yeah, exactly. And so this next line, nonetheless, Bolsonaro's hardline approach to crime has the support of many Brazilians fed up with unbridled violence. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So anyway, Many Brazilians oppose Bolsonaro for his extreme confrontational agenda on ideological and cultural issues, but these have attracted the loyalty, of course, of the evangelical bloc of Brazil, which is about 30% of all Brazilians. So he basically is the sort of Trump of the tropics. They aren't wrong to call him that. But the thing is, the problems in Brazil are just worse than the problems in the United States. And Bolsonaro's just got a funnier response in a lot of way. So when it came to COVID, he was a COVID denier. It's not that he thought COVID didn't exist. He just didn't think it was terribly dangerous and didn't want lockdowns. In fact, he was very much against lockdowns because, again, what a fascist. You go to the next one, you see that downplays it, starts firing people on any lockdowns, opposes lockdowns. And this is where we get to, I think, the closest we can find to corruption in Bolsonaro's cabinet. Now, the allegations are not against Bolsonaro himself, they're against people around him, one against his son, in fact. The chief whip in the lower house of Congress, Ricardo Barros, and Bolsonaro's son have been accused of essentially like taking bribes over the coronavirus vaccines. Who knows whether that's true or not? Probably is my answer. But the amount of money is, if you go to the next one, this is talking about the son facing the corruption probe. I mean, for example, Lula took 1.16 million, I think it was, or 1.2 million. Bolsonaro's son apparently used $320,000 as a bribe. Is that okay? But like the big stack of leftists who are corrupt in Brazil. Like I couldn't find. There was a graph of them.
They're all convicted as well, though, aren't they?
Yes.
Whereas this is an allegation.
For tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. And then you've got 320,000 in Bolsonaro, and they're all like, how could you? It's like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's probably that this is true. I mean, I don't know. But, it probably is the fact. But and so it's not Bolsonaro himself who's being alleged, but his son and people around him. But again, what do you expect? There were quite large protests over his lack of lockdowns in Brazil. Leftists going, how dare you?
Let us all gather in big crowds to show how serious we are about the threat.
Yeah, well, the banging of pots and pans became a socially distanced way for Brazilians to protest Bolsonaro during the pandemic.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure it was. Sure it was. And they blamed him for the 460,000 Brazilians dead. One of the worst death rates in the world. It's like, well, if you're going to go and get out on the streets in big groups...
Also, you're Brazil.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, but we don't actually expect the best healthcare from Brazil.
Weirdly. So anyway, we had yesterday's first round of voting. Now, the way it works in Brazil is if someone takes 50% of the votes in the first round, then that's just them. They get it. And if they don't, they have a runoff with the two leading candidates. If you can scroll down on this, you should be able to see They should have a graph, I think. I thought they had a graph. But anyway, so basically when Lula left office, he had an 83% approval rating. For someone going to jail on corruption charges, that's pretty good. Like,
I'm a corrupt asshole, but we love you.
Yeah. Well, again, you get used to the politicians you've got. I don't think I think the corruption charges came after he was out of office.
Okay.
Actually. But I will have to double check that. Again, any Brazilians in the chat, let me know if I've got any of this wrong, because of course I'm not from Brazil. But he had an 83% approval rating, and he apparently won 48% of the votes, which was roughly in line with polls. But Bolsonaro did much better than expected, taking 43%, which means his supporters outperformed polls in state and Senate races. And this is shook the left somewhat, because of course they love their polls, and of course the right-wing populists are like, the polls are lies, and Bolsonaro says this. The polls are a big pack of lies and they're not representing our actual support. Well, it seems that is the case, but Lula is in the lead.
But he was meant to be winning by what, like 15 points?
Yeah, he was meant to be 30 points up actually at one point. So like the polls, like they're obviously
now they're like 3 points away from each other.
5, but yes, very close. And the leftists are suddenly realizing, well, hang on a second, but we've been polling people in Rio de Janeiro and they all like Lula, because it's like the inner city urban rabble who have been given money by Lula. It's like, okay, but they're not the only voters in Brazil. Don't know what to tell you. But they say, so it's on October the 30th that there's the second round of voting. And if we can go to the next one, we can see the change since last year. So Lula got 57 million votes, Bolsonaro got 51 million. And of course, the two, I guess we call them independent candidates, which I believe are supposedly centrist candidates, got about 8 million between them, something like that. So essentially, what Bolsonaro needs to do is rustle up about 6 million votes. Now, it's expected that the runoff votes will go to Lula, so he probably won't win. Sadly. And as you can see, if you go on social media, Bolsonaro gets massive rallies. Like, you've just not seen rallies like this. Like, Trump's rallies are big, right? But watch for this. That's like one, like, that's a Trump rally there, right? That's the sort of average. I mean, that's just massive. Like, hundreds of thousands of people. But when the camera pans across, you'll see it's on the entire other side, and it just goes down the street.
I thought it's at a beach as well. Of course it is.
Of course it's a beach. But it just keeps going and going and going and going, and then off into the distance. Like, that is a staggering number of people. Like, it's probably like 1 million people there. And so it's no surprise that there's a great number of quiet Bolsonaro supporters. Right, if you go to the next one, you can see the general problem that the media class has is like, well, hang on a second. We thought this was going to be a whitewash. We thought it was going to be a total landslide. How has it come down to this sort of skin of the teeth, nail-biting, white-knuckle ride? And there are leftists you'll find who are commentators on this from Brazil who will be like, yeah, this is a catastrophe for Lula, actually. This one commentator I found here. I may be a bit emotional right now, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Tonight was a catastrophic night for Brazil. Lula's lead is shorter than imagined. Even those who expected a second round didn't expect Bolsonaro to perform so well. Many imagined that some last-minute votes would go to Lula, but the movement was the other way around. Third and fourth candidates performed worse than expected, and their votes seem to have gone for Bolsonaro. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying that I have any prediction or it's indicative of anything concrete, anything like that. But if they're expecting the sort of centrist candidates to go to Lula, and in fact they went to Bolsonaro, well, maybe those 6 million votes will go to Bolsonaro. Who knows?
You said this is a leftist commentator, right?
I imagine so, yeah.
I just love this line here. We can kiss sensible right-wing goodbye. It's just like, you don't believe. Like, their sensible right-wing is being left-wing. They're like, Bolsonarism is now deeply seated in Brazilian society.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I am very much enjoying these moments.
Oh, yeah. And I love the concept, and this is exactly the same in America where Biden's trying to do with the ultra MAGA types. He's trying to be like, oh yeah, MAGA Republicans.
That's something else. That's something outside of the right wing.
Not good Republicans who agree with leftism and will do everything the left say until we eventually arrive at communism, which is exactly her complaint, right? Yeah. And so
she even puts sensible in quotations, whatever.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so it's good to see that, like, things are all still to play for, right? But she's like, yeah, we can kiss goodbye to the sensible right wing. The runoff election is a new election, almost starting from scratch. The left leaves tonight demoralised. Bolsonaro and his supporters will go even harder in claims of fraud, etc. I certainly expect more political violence. Well, you guys stabbed him. I mean, Jesus.
Well, we're at demoralisation. Now for destabilisation.
Polling was insanely bad everywhere. SP State was expected to have a Workers' Party candidate, Haddad, to win. He'll be in the runoff, but made it way behind the polls, what the polls indicated. Bad polling will only strengthen Bolsonaro's claim of fraud. While the left was able to put some good ones in the legislatures, House and Senate still have a right-wing majority, and some of Bolsonaro's key names got elected. Even if Lula wins, his life will be hell, as I also anticipate in a few days. So what she's saying is that Bolsonaroism has been deeply embedded into Brazilian society. So even if Lula wins, like, half the country is like Trump country. It's like MAGA country, right, for Bolsonaro. And so they're sat there, as she says, demoralised, being like, oh, they're not going to agree to our communism.
The best possible thing is getting the guns in the hands of the people.
Yes.
I mean, if you're a Brazilian, if I was a Brazilian, I'd be getting as many guns as I could right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's just the aspect of, like, even if he wins, he's just going to start singing, keep my rifle by my side. Like, what are you going to do? Come and take it.
So what if he doesn't win?
Well, there's another option.
How likely is a coup in Brazil?
How likely is South America going to be South American?
Well, I mean, Bolsonaro did. One of the things they complained about is he admired the dictatorship of I think it was the 60s, and he was alive for that as well. So
wasn't he serving in the army for
he
that?
Was, yeah, he was. Bolsonaro is, of course, following the Trump path, and now I just want to point out on YouTube that I have no information on the voting integrity of Brazilian elections, so I will merely be repeating Bolsonaro's claims, which I do not endorse. But he's been issuing dire warnings of a rigged vote. because they think he's trying to head off a predicted loss in the in the presidential election. And the real danger that violence comparable to that of January the 6th in Washington might occur. I think it'd be a lot worse in Brazil. But B, the danger that someone in the protesting department the protesters is going to get shot?
Yeah, no, actually, January 6th wasn't an insurrection. Get this out of your ass.
No.
Well, what happened in Brazil would be far more interesting.
And the only persons who have died as a consequence of the protest was Ashley Babbitt. So, don't know what you're talking about, Newsweek. But they're like, look, we don't actually think a coup like in 1964 is likely, or at least it would be likely to succeed, because in 1964, the coup had supportive Brazilian business and media elites. And of course, Bolsonaro doesn't have those things. I mean, he probably has some business support, but not media elites. But the thing is,
Does he have
Bolsonaro,
military support?
Yes, he is popular with the army. Unsurprisingly, the army captain, who's now the president, who's pro-Brazil, he is quite popular in the military. Yes, and
the media elites don't have guns.
And Bolsonaro has threatened a coup in the past. Not even very long ago, either. It was only last year where he was like, well,
if I had to, for some reason.
There's not even the littlest doubt, Bolsonaro said, I'd stage a coup in the same day. Next year's elections will have to be clean. Either there'll be clean elections or we won't have elections. Much stronger words than Trump. I do it the same day. It's like
Okay, he's not messing around.
Probably not. But I mean, it's Brazil, South America. Yeah. So anyway, that's the current state of play with my hero Bolsonaro. I disavow the coup and any mention of a coup. If he commits a coup, I do not endorse it. That's what I think I'm legally obligated to say.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series we do, this one on William the Conqueror Part 1. And if you want to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.